It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Bill Doherty, CEO of Day & Ross, one of the largest transportation companies in Canada. Bill is a charismatic and innovative executive leader with 28 years experience in the industry, starting at FedEx where he worked for over 20 years. His last role there was managing daily operations for 10,000 employees with annual revenue north of $1 billion. He has a proven track record of streamlining operations, improving bottom line performance with expertise in building strong teams, managing executive performance, anticipating future industry changes, and executing clear strategic plans and driving revenue growth. Bill Doherty, welcome into the corner office.
Brant, thank you. Glad to have a chance to visit with you and look forward to our conversation today.
Oh, it's great to have you back. We spoke a few weeks back and you got to know each other a little bit, and I want to, get a chance to really kind of track your career and all the wonderful things you've done. But let's kind of start in the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your early family life and, where you grew up and some of the things that went on during that part of time in your life.
I'm originally from the Boston area, specifically Cambridge and Watertown. I was born in Cambridge.
I couldn't tell by the accent.
I know. I'm working with a speech coach on that.
I love it.
Big family. Total 9 folks in the family. A lot of 7 boys, 1 girl. And
wow, where were you in the lineup?
I am number 5 in the boy order.
Number 5.
Middle child, so I'm very adept.
Yeah.
Right,
right.
But went to spent most of my formative time in Massachusetts, and relative to my career, most of my early jobs were in the Massachusetts area or New England. Pretty, I guess, whatever normal is, normal upbringing.
Well, tell us about mom and dad. What kind of work did they do? Mom was mostly working in the home, I can imagine, with 9 kids.
She was. My mother was the brains of the family. My dad had an interesting career. He was in the Korean War and ended up as a magistrate in the court system. And in between that, he was in the State House in Massachusetts.
Oh.
And my mother, so she
were those government positions? Government?
They were. Yeah, they were. Mm-hmm. So pretty much a civil servant his whole life.
Right.
My mother, for the most part, she took care of things at home but also did a lot of work for my father relative to his political career, which lasted about 8 to 10 years, and ultimately, and very involved in the local communities that we lived in.
Sure.
With all those children, there was no way to not to be involved in sports and PTA and the normal things that sort of make the school systems and the sports things run.
May I make an assumption that you grew up in the Catholic Church?
I did, and I say that with pride. Even in these times, it's great foundation, and
absolutely.
I still draw on it to help me try to make the best decisions possible.
Did you go through the parochial schools?
Not so much. My children did, not so much me. Yeah. We started there, and we were in and out. But no, public schools all the way up through middle school to high school, and plenty of catechism, though, to be quite
Right,
frank.
I can
So
imagine.
there
Right.
wasn't,
Plenty
there
of
wasn't,
mass.
yeah, plenty, yeah. So I don't think it really mattered. I don't think it could have been much more immersion if than that. So, but all good. But listen, for somebody of my vintage, so to speak, that was pretty common. So
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
a regular family, and we weren't even close to being the biggest family in the neighborhood. So
Wow, wow,
pretty,
cool.
again, I wouldn't call it traditional because I don't think traditional really means anything. I think traditional it's just what it was and sort of where we were from. So.
Well, you said your mom had an influence on you. What were some of the things you remember in the early days that mom directed you towards or away from, perhaps, as the case may be?
Oh, I would, listen, my mother probably is the biggest part of me and my brother's lives, especially, and my
Yeah,
sister for that matter.
yeah.
Listen, a sense of commitment. In
Mm,
some ways, she could be very pious, but very modern.
yeah.
But she understood the uh, the world, and she wanted you to take things as you'd like them to be, and try to change things, and try to help people, and put others first, and with a
Mm,
sense of humility, not looking for any
yeah.
people to pat you on the back. Just take care of others, and good things will happen to you. I think that's a pretty common theme with a
Yeah.
lot of folks, and
A
I'd
woman
say
of her generation, huh?
yeah, and I think she did it
Yeah,
quite well. So
yeah.
we've got again, it's good foundation. You still have to grow, but those lessons will probably lead you to the right outcomes in most cases.
Yeah, awesome. What about other influencers? Were there people, coaches you had or teachers that had a significant influence on you, Bill?
Yeah, yeah. Listen. Other than my father had great influence on us because of some of the things that he did, which sort of put us out in the community a little bit. But I
Right.
would say, I was lucky enough to play sports, and I played sports in high school, and I made it into the college level. I would say, probably when I think back, if there was a coach that I had in high school, his name was Leo Harrington, and I can recall his name so easy because he was a very impactful guy. A guy of his generation, served in the military, was in the Marine Corps, but
Oh,
was a very strong personality, disciplined, sort of a a tough but fair person,
right.
but with a great sense of humor. And the one
Mm,
thing he taught you is always believe in yourself. So
right.
and when you get knocked down, learn to dust yourself off and get up again because something good is always coming around the corner.
Awesome. Love it. Were you a good student in school, Bill?
I would say I was at best an average student, but I was one of
Right.
those kids that I think I had a pretty active imagination, and I was always thinking about things that maybe were a little bit too lofty at the moment, and I maybe should have
Right.
spent a little bit more time in the textbooks. But for the most part, I had a great education. Of the teachers I had took a genuine interest in me, and at the end of the day, I think it serves me well. And and the few things that I didn't learn then, I've probably read up on them more now than I should have anyway. So,
Now, you mentioned sports. Did you play multiple sports, or what was your favorite growing up?
well, my favorite sport would have been hockey, but I played
Oh,
football in high school and in college.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but my favorite sport to this day is hockey. Growing up in the Boston area, you could not be
Yeah,
a big hockey fan because of the influence of people like Bobby Orr and the
of
big bad
course. Yeah,
Bruins. And
yeah.
now you're losing about half your podcast because I'm talking about the Bruins. So,
That's all right. That's
but
all
I
right.
loved every sport. I mean, I love baseball, the Red Sox, but I would say I'm a Boston sports fan, true and true.
Yeah. What about entrepreneurial things? Were there things that you did growing up in the Cambridge area? Maybe the ubiquitous paper route, or selling Christmas cards at Christmas time, or other types of things that you did for spending money?
All of the above.
Yeah, yeah.
We had a paper route. I shared it with a good friend of mine, Jerry McCarthy, and
Okay.
based on the sports schedules, he would do it some days, I would do it other days, and
Right,
and we
right.
do, and then we'd go off. That was back when you actually collected money from
Oh
in an
yeah,
envelope from everybody. I'm sure you can remember that, and
that's right. Go knock
uh,
on the door
go
and
knock on the door, and
yeah,
whether it was a buck 25 for a weekly delivery, including
yeah,
Sunday,
yeah.
or 75 for the weekly only. So I know we shared a route because we both played sports, and that way we could always figure out a way to arrange it. I worked some interesting jobs. I worked in high school. I had the opportunity to work at the Army Material Research Center in Watertown, Mass.
Right, right.
place, was basically a military armory that actually had a very large science component to it. And I did, handyman janitorial work,
Right.
but it was a great way to see, a cross section of a multitude of industries under one, very large facility. So,
Right.
and I did some typical manual labor stuff. I loaded trucks and unloaded trucks at a retail store, or actually a garden store, I should say. So just normal things to keep yourself in, gas money and enough spending money to go enjoy yourself a little bit.
Now you went to Becker College and you said you played football. Did you go there on a scholarship or
I
was that?
did. Well, I it's funny, Brent. I had sort of a bridged kind of college career. I ended up originally starting in a college up in Vermont called Norwich University,
Okay. Yeah.
which was one of the original DoD schools, or the ROTC schools
Oh,
for
right. Of course. Yeah.
like Texas A&M and those schools. Not on the
Right. Right.
not
Right.
nearly the level of Texas A&M for athletics, to be clear.
Yeah.
Um, but because I was working part time at FedEx, I actually stopped going to school full time.
Okay.
Started my career at FedEx, and then ultimately finished at Becker years later, where FedEx helped me through tuition reimbursement and things like that to get
Oh,
my
got it. So it
my
was at
college
Norwich
degree.
that you played football then?
Yes, for, no, two
Yeah.
years at Norwich. Yes.
Yeah, tours in the years. Awesome, awesome. And so FedEx became a part of your life even during college years. Now, was that just part-time work that you took on when you first started there, or how did you, began your career with them?
Actually, I was working. I was very lucky. I had received an opportunity to work at United Parcel Service
Okay.
while I was in high school as a seasonal worker, carrying a card.
Right.
Meaning, I mean, I was in the union, but
Union.
what they
Yeah.
would do is they
Yeah.
would let you work 28 days, and then they would put you down for a few months, and then you'd come back in the summer when they were having their vacation schedule.
Ah.
I did that for a couple of seasons, and then ultimately I was working part time, and my brother was in the Navy and was recruited to go work at FedEx. And ultimately, I ended up getting to FedEx through my brother because they were growing
Ah.
so fast.
Right.
So my
Right.
first job at FedEx was washing the trucks and loading the trucks, and
I
ultimately
love it.
working at the airport at night loading the planes. Back then, you had one or two planes leaving Boston to go to Memphis, Tennessee, and so it was
Sure.
it was an interesting way to start the business. It gave you a great view of sort of
Wow.
what transportation could be,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
was evolving to. So I was very lucky to
Right.
be there in the 1984 window, and it was a good time.
And you were there over 20 years, great
Yeah,
career, and I want to talk a little bit about that.
sure.
So, did you join them full time then at that point, or when did that kind of become a reality for you?
I got an opportunity in '85,
85.
which would have been my senior year in college.
Right, right.
Again, the growth was pretty ridiculous there.
I
We see,
imagine. Yeah.
and they were looking for people to come on as full-time drivers. And at the same time, they gave me an opportunity to go learn to drive a tractor trailer.
No. Huh.
So I basically stopped going to school full time and converted to them full time, and that's really how my career
Yeah.
started with them. I
Yeah.
became a full time driver, and one of the ancillary things that I did for them was also drive a tractor trailer, because that's how you fed the buildings around New England, so to speak, for all the
Sure.
freight and all
Sure.
the product. And that's how I, really got. I would say my career started there, and then I was lucky enough to have incremental assignments, working with dangerous goods and things like that. Very,
Mm.
important traditional things for transportation companies. And I was allowed to get into a management program, and ultimately they placed me in a facility in Wilmington, Massachusetts, working for a great guy named Tom O'Hearn. And that's really the first time I would say I had, outside of my family, in a business environment, I had somebody that sort of mentored me and sort of
Yeah.
began to show me how to handle myself in a business environment, and more importantly, in a customer environment.
When was the first time you started managing people, Bill?
1986,
86.
87.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was what they called an operations manager,
Right. Right.
and I worked the night shift because that was the most important shift at FedEx at that time,
Sure.
because you're trying to make an aircraft departure to move the product around the country, and that back
Right.
then around the world.
Right.
So it was a great learning environment. I tell people that it was a place because of the time constraints. There was no way to have decision by committee. You had to
Right.
really understand what the core responsibilities were, and what you had to meet from expectations, and you'll learn very quickly to make decisions that
Yeah.
would help the business, because you didn't have time to call someone and ask for a lot of
Right.
advice, because you were literally dealing with minutes, not hours.
Were you managing folks that, had more senior than you or had been there longer or older, so to speak, or is it kind of managing peer levels at that first time?
I would say mostly older. I was
Yeah.
probably at that time one of the younger frontline managers in the company.
Did that present
Uh,
some challenges for you?
oh, sure, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
you listen. FedEx was built, by a lot of folks that came there as a second career, but had very strong transportation backgrounds.
Right.
We had a lot of folks that came over from United Parcel Service. We had a lot of folks that came over from traditional trucking companies. And even the drivers that you would talk to, a lot of them were very seasoned transportation professionals, and they understood uh, they understood the business at a very granular level, and
Right.
they understood what good looked like and what silly, maybe stupid, looked like as well. And they weren't at all shy to tell you that.
You got some correctional
Yeah. And,
instructions at those times, I
but I
think.
was glad to take it, Brent. I was glad to take it, because most of them were good family people, and they were trying to
Yeah,
help you
yeah,
out. And most
yeah,
of that, when I reflect upon it, sometimes you can get your energy can get the best of you, and
sure.
sometimes somebody like that sort of helping you reset a little bit can be very impactful and helpful.
So thinking back to that period, what were some of those earliest leadership lessons you took away from those early jobs?
I think to always put the person who's actually doing the work sort of in the forefront of the
Mm,
problem. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
you learn again, not having time to go out and have quality action teams all the time in the moment, because FedEx was a very in the moment business because of
of
the
course.
stressors on the operations.
Right, right.
You learn to put the person who is actually dealing with the customer, dealing with the challenge at a large customer, small customer, or a customer that maybe they were in a very distant geography. You had to understand the complexity of that. So you relied a lot on the good input of the frontline folks, and it allowed you to sort of, okay, this problem is bigger than the obvious things, and we need to, if we're going to make a course correction here, we're going to need to do more than just tell them to work faster or work harder.
Right, right.
So you learn very early on that the answer was probably somewhere where the job was being done.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you had a wonderful career there, as I said, over 20 years. You ended up as VP of Global Operations, right? You were
Yep,
based in Dallas. Was that your last location with them?
it was part of an
Yeah,
acquisition when we brought a retail network to life for FedEx.
right.
Which has turned out to be a great accomplishment for them, and it's been transformational for their business. I'm
Sure.
very proud of that. The CEO down there, Brian Phillips, does a great job leading what's now today known as the FedEx Office Group, and
Of
it's a
course, yeah.
big part of their e-commerce and their
So when they
overall
bought Kinko's,
Kinko's.
right? Was that?
Yep.
Yeah, right,
And I
right.
was involved in that very early on, even pre the
Oh,
announcement days, as
right.
sort of the
Well, I
team
lived
that
in
was.
Santa Barbara for many years, Bill, so
Oh,
I
then
knew
you know
Paul.
Mr. Paul
Yeah,
Awful,
Orfala
Mr.
very well.
Awfula. Yep.
Yeah, his kids went with my kids to school, and we were involved in a couple of boards together. Very
Yeah.
interesting guy.
Very interesting guy, and a very entrepreneurial guy,
Entrepreneurial.
but a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
people-centrist individual. I met him
Yes.
twice during the process.
Right. Awesome. Well, so gosh, I'm sure there was many points in time during those 20 years that you thought this is a great company. They gave you plenty of opportunities. They moved you around a lot. Tell us a little bit of kind of your decision to leave because, I know you had a couple of different things you did before you came to Dan Ross. And just tell us a little bit about kind of the thinking process as to why, you decided to move on and pursue other companies in the industry.
Well, listen, I can tell you that, it was never, those decisions are never easy for anyone. But,
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
being there close to 25 years, I actually
Wow.
have 25 years of service with them based on the retirement calculator, because I
Sure.
started so young as a part-timer.
I was going to
Um,
say, I hope they counted those years you were washing the trucks.
They did. No, listen. Well, they did, and I'm very grateful for that, actually.
That's
And
great.
it
That's
speaks to
great.
the organization's
Yeah, their culture.
their
Yeah.
placement and their culture correctly.
Right. Right.
Uh, the I was at a point in my life where my older children were in college, and I was
Right.
thinking about okay, at 25 years, do I want to do this
Yeah.
with FedEx for the rest of my working time? And at that moment, I thought, well, 25 years anywhere is a great thing to say,
Of course.
and I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial bite. That's why I was lucky enough at FedEx. I was always getting the chance to move around and do some new and exciting things. I ended up making the decision to leave, and I ended up, in 2008, departing with nothing but great memories. And
Yeah.
I went out on my own, and I tried to start up a business that was or actually restart a business that had come on some hard times, and in the reverse logistics space, and
The
in
warehousing
the
space, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
in the
Right.
in the in the e-commerce space. We actually had a platform called Bidtopia, which
Wow.
was about sort of monetizing inventory, things that were shelf pulls and returns, and it was a great experience. I was doing that with another retired FedEx executive, a gentleman named Ken May, and we tried to go out and source funding and things like that. In 2008, as you know, very well know, that was a very tough environment for the U.S. given the real estate issues and some of the financial constraints that were in place, and some of the sort of resetting of the banking industry. And it was a great experience, but it was a very tough environment. But I learned a lot, and it sort of set me on my second career, if you will, looking at other unique opportunities where my skills from FedEx were transferable, and I could go help companies maybe make some improvements and do some different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And so that was a real tough period to do a
Sure.
transition. Certainly during that 28 to 210 period. Was there, some of that involved as well? Was the recession kind of part of that?
Well, no, not from the FedEx side, no, because they were
No.
actually doing quite well. I think, again, I think for me it was more of a personal decision. I wanted to go
Right.
try to do something different. I hate to use the term that, but sometimes you feel like your career is getting a little stale. You've been someplace for 25 years.
Sure.
You sort of know all the ins and outs of it at some level. But for me, it was about trying to do something different for the balance of my working career, and that required taking some risk. And I think people that are dealing with those decisions, you have to be willing to take some risk. And all things aren't going to work out, but that doesn't mean it was a bad outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So did a couple of different things until you came to Dan Ross. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, listen, I think for me, going to Day and Ross was about timing, and it was a great fit for me given some of the FedEx and post FedEx experiences I had. A little bit over about little, well, actually 6 years ago, roughly, I was talking to the organization for a good 6 to 8 months, and then ultimately I was lucky enough to be offered the opportunity to be the president and CEO. Um, you know, t- Day and Ross is a pretty pretty scaled transportation business, very well known in Canada, a little bit lesser known in the U.S. Small integrator, they can handle any conveyance that a customer might need, whether it was traditional trucking or air services. We do all of the above. We've made some strong acquisitions in the last 2 to 3 years that have helped
Right.
us have more of a North American sort of footprint. Um, and culturally, it was a great fit for me as I got to know the folks up in Hartland, New Brunswick, where the headquarters is, and now we have some other offices in the U.S. It's a good fit. But it would be a traditional trucking transportation provider, and a small integrator that does all supply chain services for customers. And we've got a great book of business.
Yeah.
We're trying to, we're trying to get bigger every year with the rest of the competitive landscape, and we've been lucky enough to grow the business, and we feel good about it. But again, like most transportation businesses, it starts with the people, and we're lucky to have some great people.
Yeah. Yeah. And was it a recruiting opportunity? How did you come into that role?
It was absolutely a recruiting opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, it was a search that was being conducted, and I was lucky enough to be on the slate of candidates, and through obviously the selection process, I got to different stages of that sort of
Yeah.
get to know you discovery process around who could be the best fit. And ultimately, I was offered the opportunity, and I was very happy to do that. And
Yeah.
everything, and 5 years later, I'm real happy with that decision, and things are going pretty well for us as an organization. I can say I'm truly happy with that. Again, every decision takes a little bit of risk. It was for me personally, being a U.S. citizen, although living in New England, Heartland, New Brunswick is probably closer than a lot of places I have worked in the
Right.
United States. So it's not,
Right.
geography was really not the issue, but it is a little different, to say you work for a
Work for a
Canadian
Canadian
company.
company. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, it's I find it to be uh, there's a lot more similar than there are any differences. So at the end of the day, it's actually been a very easy transition, and I think, people in general are very adept at change, and I think that if you have an open and sort of and a curious mind, change becomes pretty easy for you.
Well, tell us a little bit about the business, Day and Ross. How big they are, employees, and a little bit about their culture and their current business model.
Yeah, listen, we've got, between our drivers and our owner operators and brokers around North America, we've got, 8,000 team members. We in our, 5,000 trucks, thousands and thousands of trailers more than the trucks. So we're number 31 in the Transport Topics top 100 transportation for hire
Yeah.
companies. We're based in a small town in Heartland, New Brunswick, literally probably 4 or 5 miles from the Maine border. It's a pretty heavy agricultural area.
Hmm. Yeah.
We're part of the McCain Food Group, which is a very large food organization
Yep.
all around the world. We're somewhat autonomous because of the nature of our business versus a CPG company, and but we've got great partnership with them, and they purchased the company, the McCain family, which is
Right.
ultimately turned into the food group, over 60 years ago, and they've had this transportation company, which was very much captive at one time, but now is much more of a traditional, transportation company with a lot of customers, and McCain is one of the best customers we have.
Have you been involved in kind of that diversification from McCain, or has McCain owned them for a longer period of time?
McCain has owned them for a longer time. Our
Yeah.
diversification is some of the recent acquisitions in the United States, in Michigan and York, Pennsylvania specifically.
Right. Got it. Got it. Cool. And tell us a little bit about the culture. If you had to kind of define, the culture, it is mostly driven by the CEO. I know you've got obviously a parent company, but if you had to try to just describe, kind of what's unique or what's different or, what the company culture is about, how would you phrase that?
I'll tell you, I think I would say that it's a company that puts a lot of faith in its employees to do what they need to do for our customers. We sell service. At the end of the day, we have equipment, but ultimately it's a service offering.
Right.
But I would say people, they're human and they're brave. So we have a lot of folks that will take a lot of risks on their own because of the nature of our business, and they do a great job for us. And the people take a lot of pride and ownership.
Right.
And that's true for the people in Heartland and the people in Vancouver and the people in Pennsylvania and Michigan. We've got in Toronto, and where we have a significant concentration of folks. We're very lucky. We've got people that are very loyal to our customers, and ultimately that makes them very loyal to us because I think they believe in what we're trying to accomplish, and we're keeping things in the right kind of balance.
Got it. Got it. Well, that's great. And if you had to say, kind of, with regards to type of people you attract, what are you looking for in the people that you reach out to and want to hire and invest in?
Well, Brent, I think because we have all the disciplines of a very large business. We're 1.3 billion in revenue, so we have an IT department, we have a big accounting department, we have an HR department. We really we look for talent. We don't look always just for people that have transportation background. We're looking for people with good business skills as well as good people skills. So, because we have all the disciplines, it's not hard for us to bring someone in that might end up in the safety and compliance of the business
Right.
as in a leadership position, but that person in 3 to 5 years could be in a frontline operations position leading a large region for us. So we're looking for talent, and then ultimately we'll find the functional fit for them initially, and then ultimately their career will be ultimately where they want to take it. Because again, I think there's a lot of skills that are very transferable. So we're looking for good people with, with good skills, and specifically good people skills.
Understand. Yeah, great. And pretty high retention rates. Is it different kind of operating in a group in Canada than the U.S.? You obviously worked for FedEx for so many years, other U.S. based companies. Is there kind of different sense of loyalty there, or is it pretty much the same because of the industry?
Yeah, listen, I don't find. First off, our people are very loyal, irregardless of the geography. I find that the people in Canada have high affinity for the organizations they work for. They take a lot of pride, but I find that very true in the U.S. as well. I think good companies, no matter where they are, people have that same sense of pride and that same sense of belonging, and I think that creates the perfect kind of retention environment.
Yeah.
Listen, we have our fair share. People get recruited away to other opportunities. Some of them we're super happy for them, and other ones we're sad. But at the end of the day, we've got enough bench and folks that are doing a good job that we'll keep our best, and we're also lucky enough to have some folks go do some other things as well. So I'm not, we worry about that because we don't want to ever take that for granted. But the folks there do a great job, and for the most part, I would say in general our folks are pretty loyal to the brand because we've done a good job of sharing the vision and what the future looks like.
All right, cool. And do you get up there often? Do you manage mostly by long distance? I mean, we've been in a unique period this last year and a half with the pandemic, but how often do you actually go to the headquarters? Has that been frequent?
Pre-COVID, it would have been extremely frequent. I would say at least 2 weeks out of the month, which I think
Right.
was the right balance. But we have over 100 facilities just in Canada, and we're building a physical plant in the United States. So I can always go to work somewhere.
Sure.
And I spend a lot of time in our not our U.S. headquarters, but we have a significant concentration down in Pennsylvania. I spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania. But for the last 18 months or so, I have not had a chance to go back to Heartland, and I'm actually planning a trip to go back up there September 13th. So it'll be my first time in a year and a half, and I'm very much looking forward to that. But early on, I think if the business and the heartbeat of the business is in Heartland, New Brunswick, if you're going to try to lead an organization, I think you need to embed yourself in that environment and get to know the folks that have been there for, in some cases, a very long time because we've got great tenure. And then that was important for me to help people educate me on the business. Transportation companies might look the same to everyone as they're driving down the highway. It's a truck is a truck, but the reality is there's a lot of differences and there's a lot of nuance. And I was glad to take the education from the folks in Heartland to tell me how the business works and operates. And ultimately, they can tell you also what needs to happen to make it an even better environment.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Bill, you've been terrific with your insights and telling us about your career. We always ask one last question of all our guests, and that's kind of what career and life advice would you give to someone who maybe has their eyes on the corner office, or like you, has been a long-term employee of a great company but makes that decision to go entrepreneurial. What would you say to those folks who may be considering those options?
I think people need to be willing to have more confidence in yourself. I think sometimes
Mm,
people don't recognize the skills that they have. And I don't think it's because they don't, they're not reflective or they're not paying attention. I think it's because people tend to think everyone knows how to do X, Y, or Z. The reality is everyone doesn't know how to do X, Y, or Z. And if you've got really good skills and you've done some unique things, be confident in your abilities. And if
yeah,
you're confident in your abilities, I think change becomes much easier for you. And when change becomes easier, I think that opens the whole pool of opportunities up to you where you can maybe take a little bit of risk because there is risk in change.
right.
And you need to be willing to fail once in a while to get ahead. But have confidence in the things that you've learned because not everyone learns them the same way. Not everyone knows them at the level of depth you might know them. And be proud of that and use that to
Mm,
help you get to where you want to be long term. And and don't be afraid to take, stepping stones, because there are opportunities that maybe round you out as a person, then let you get to the next level. I think just people need to be willing to do that. And that doesn't mean you have to always leave the organization you're in. There are a lot of big organizations that have, again, a multidisciplined, and you can do things within organizations to round out your skill sets, maybe for another big opportunity with your current organization, or maybe with some other organization. Just, you have to, take a good skills assessment of what you know and what's very transferable.
Sage counsel and wisdom. Bill Doherty, CEO of Day & Ross, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Brian, it was great to visit with you today, and as always, it's great to catch up with you.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.